Today's topic, how to act like a healthcare professional. Nurses are healthcare professionals once in practice, but how does a professional carry themselves and behave? Is it acceptable to openly berate and gossip about colleagues and others we work with? Do you see physicians openly gossip and slander fellow physicians? In 30 plus years of clinical practice, I've yet to experience this phenomenon, but yet I routinely overhear my nurse colleagues berate and gossip about other nurses on an almost daily basis. From my lens of current clinical practice, it's time for nurses to act like the professionals we claim to be. Professional behavior needs to begin now, though, as a nursing student. So, for example, do you as a student talk negatively about other students, faculty, or the nursing program to others, but not to the faculty or those responsible for your complaint? If so, this is indirect communication and is unprofessional behavior that does not befit a student entering the nursing profession. Do you believe that your college owes you a degree because you paid for it? This too is an unprofessional attitude that represents the essence of entitlement. And that is something that many students have coming into not just nursing, but to any college program. Do you as a student come to class late or text during lecture? This too is unprofessional and disrespectful to nursing faculty. While you are a nursing student, I want to encourage you to make it a priority to embrace the highest level of professional behavior in word and deed. So let's define it. Let's talk about, because I believe that many students, this incivility is endemic in our culture today. Look at the political discourse and the process today. It is inherently uncivil and even bullying. And yet this is acceptable, and therefore many of us are products of what our environment says this is normative. But we must step back and determine, is this truly the best that we as a healthcare professional can become? So let's talk about this. Student entitlement. Let's define this a little bit more. This is exhibited and demonstrated by those students who expect high grades for modest amounts of work or little work. They also exhibit what I would call a consumer mindset towards education. They deserve a good grade because they paid for it. They refuse to also accept responsibility, and many of them make excuses for their failures. It's important, if you're a nursing student, just be honest. One of the professional behaviors that's inherent of any professional is reflection and self-reflection. And it's important that for everything that we do in practice, including our attitudes and our professional behavior, am I a part of the problem or am I part of the solution? And be honest. And if you are, we're all works in progress. But let's make it a priority to be the best professional we can be while yet a student. So let's talk about student incivility. And we're going to get to faculty incivility in just a minute, so I'm not going to let my nurse educators off the hooks in this video either. But let's talk about, according to the literature, and Cynthia Clark has done one of the most phenomenal researches and the expert, bar none, of academia and student incivility in nursing education today. And these are some of the most common incivil behaviors that she has documented, that students do the following. They're disruptive and include the following. They're rude, engage in side conversations, or dominate class. Inappropriate use of their cell phone during lecture. They are late to class and they leave early, even sleeping in class. They get angry or they make excuses for poor performance. They're inadequately prepared, and they pressure faculty until they get what they want. I saw this many times when it came to grades and when it came to test items. Many students thought they knew more than me when it came to certain test items, and therefore they used oftentimes the textbook inappropriately to support their position. And they're students. Now, yes, faculty can make mistakes, but I was kind of blown away by some of the attitudes that kind of almost a superiority of knowledge when I was the expert and I wasn't really treated like one. That felt very uncivil to me, and I know it's not uncommon. And they badmouth other students, faculty, and the nursing program. And again, what causes this culture of incivility? I think that we all have a fallen human nature to begin with. That's ground zero, but we can also change and we can behave appropriately. But the literature says this: the competitive and academically rigorous culture of nursing education and the high levels of stress that are inherent really are a contributing factor to the amount of incivility that really is kind of like a byproduct of this stress. And the themes that they've identified include the demanding workload that even causes burnout, even as students are yet to complete their program. And that's a problem that I've talked about that needs to be addressed. How do we take care of ourselves? As nurses and as nursing students, we care for our patients well. We don't care for ourselves that well. And that's a topic of another video. But self-care is hugely important in order to manage the stress that you really can't get away from. You need to deal with it and deal with it appropriately. But let's talk about incivility and how faculty can be uncivil in academia, because that's a problem as well. I'm not going to talk about faculty to faculty incivility. That's endemic, unfortunately, as well. And Cynthia Clark's recent research says that when you look at mild, moderate, and severe levels of incivility, 96% of all nursing departments across the country have an elephant in the room, and it's called incivility. So what influences nursing faculty to demonstrate incivility towards students? Now again, stress has been identified in the literature as the most common thread, not only with students, but with faculty as well. And when we look at some of the most common and disrespectful uncivil behaviors from faculty to educators, this is what Clark and her literature and her research found out. This is how faculty are uncivil. They exert position and control over students. They set unrealistic expectations. They assume a know-it-all attitude. They are rigid, unapproachable, or reject student opinions. They devalue students' prior life experiences. They have difficulty managing the classroom. They make condescending or put-downs to students, or they show favoritism to certain students. They can also refuse or be reluctant to answer questions. And again, the thread of stress is the commonality, but it's also an attitude of disrespect. You know, faculty are stressed out. Students have their own stress of just surviving. It's like Survivor all over again, but this is real. It's not just a TV show. For faculty, it's an incredible workload that I think students need to understand educators' perspectives, that education never leaves you. Teaching was the hardest thing I've done compared to clinical practice. I can swipe in and swipe out as a nurse, even in critical care and ER, and I left it behind me. From an educator's perspective, you never leave academia. There's emails to write, to respond to, there's test questions to rewrite, there's PowerPoints to prepare and to improve, and on it goes. Therefore, faculty are stressed by their workload, and I think students need to understand and empathize as well, as do educators need to empathize with the student experience. But Cynthia Clark talked about the dance of incivility. It's like one leads and the other follows. And the defining thread that Clark identified is the essence of, is there a dance of respect where faculty are respecting students, and in response, students reciprocate by giving respect back, as well as students doing the same. They're responding in the same way of giving respect to faculty, faculty give it back. Therefore, depending on the culture of the academic department, be honest. Ask yourself as a student or as an educator, which value dominates not only how faculty and faculty get along and treat one another, as well as how do faculty respond and treat to students and students to faculty. Is it respect and is it valuing one another, or is it disrespect and tearing one another apart, especially faculty to faculty? That needs to be addressed, needs to be talked about. Clark uses the word civility. She doesn't like to talk about bullying, kind of a negative connotation. She uses the word, let's pursue civility, which really is in essence the ability to have healthy relationships. You know, good education, what I observe with my students, is that it's dependent upon the quality of the relationship that I have with my students determines the quality and what they're going to learn from me. If they know that I care, even though I'm hard, even though I set high standards and I have a high but realistic bar, if they know that I care about them and I want them to be the best nurse possible, they'll go to the mat for me. And they'll do it not for me, but for their own knowledge and to be the best that they can be, because I'm role modeling that as an educator. They know that I care. But when faculty, through their behavior and through their verbal and even nonverbal behavior, communicate the opposite, that relationship is fractured. And I believe that really it's all about the relationship. If I would encourage students as well as faculty and faculty in their departments, it's all about the relationship. If we can have healthy relationships in all three of these areas, we can really have a civil and a respectful culture. So as we look at what can educators do to just practically demonstrate and live it out, live civility, live a culture of respect. First, model and role model caring and respect in all that you do so your students can see what true professionalism looks like in practice. Provide opportunities to dialogue with students in open formats, such as a town hall meeting. Give them the opportunity to vent and to share legitimate frustrations, but this needs to be controlled because it can spiral very quickly in the wrong direction. Third, establish written policies or place expectations clearly defined of what is civil and what is uncivil in the student handbook, so students know when they're crossing that line. As educators, listen carefully to your students. Give them positive feedback. Students are sponges. They need affirmation more than you know. When you see them doing something well, be sure that you don't just take it for granted, but pour into them. Affirm your students, and you will be just impressed with what that will mean to them personally and professionally. Give them that positive feedback. And again, talk about the importance of managing stress and time management well. Self-care. How can you manage the high level of stress inherent in nursing education must be a priority from day one in your programs. But how can students demonstrate civility more intentionally towards faculty? Number one, be prepared, respectful, and engaged in your learning process. Many students want to be spoon-fed. They want to revert back to those early toddler years, and any educator must resist that temptation to just give in to that desire of giving them what they need to know. No way. They need to be active and participants in their learning. Nursing is a practice-based profession. They must be able to apply what they learn to the bedside, and the only way is through relevant and meaningful active learning. Spoon feeding in any way is going to impact adversely the learning of students as well as the outcomes of their patients. Secondly, students must commit to do not speak negative or in a derogatory manner ever, in an open manner towards students, faculty, and the nursing programs. This is inherent. This is endemic, I think, in most programs. And I think that students need to recognize that's unprofessional and it's uncivil and it needs to stop. And I would encourage you all to look at the desire to be the best, desire to be the good that you can be. Abide by standards of your student conduct in the student manual, as well as work towards a common goal of civility and respect. Now, today's topic was derived from my book, Think Like a Nurse, Practical Preparation for Professional Practice. And in my early chapter 4, I discuss how to act like a professional. And I include a frank discussion of incivility as well as practical other aspects of how we can encourage and raise that high bar of professionalism in our programs. I wrote my book, Think Like a Nurse, to be a written mentor to help students practically situate their knowledge to practice, and is supported by over 200 references in the nursing literature. And see for yourself why nursing programs around the country have adopted this book already as a supplemental or required resource in their program. And if you'd like more information on that, please contact me at the link in this email or in this video. By emphasizing need-to-know content, how to think like a nurse using clinical reasoning, and emphasizing standards of professional behavior, you're going to address the incivility that's present in nursing and nursing education today. In closing, nursing education is in need of radical transformation. One simple step that transformational nurse educators can take today is, again, decreasing content saturation, but as well as teaching students how to act like a professional by emphasizing respect and value for one another. But more importantly, this professional behavior is caught by the role modeling of civility, caring, and respect that nurse educators must openly demonstrate towards one another as well as every student. So let's do our part to create a culture of civility and respect in nursing education that will then follow our students into clinical practice, where incivility continues to wound and devastate all too many nurses. This needs to change. Let this needed change begin today.